Charlie.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Fun to see so many unique faces in the room today. So we have Jerry visiting us. He found out about us from the Observer, so nice job, Susan. This is Susan who runs the Observer, so he likes your paper. And then we have a bunch of McGills over at this table. So we have Ruth and Stephen and Brendan, who is our speaker today. And since Charlie is up on the monitor, I will let him introduce you if he's up for it. But we'll do that in a few minutes, and then we'll get you talking about the Long Trail, which I'm excited to hear about your perspective. But before that, we're gonna have Walter do our Rotary Minute.
So we're going to talk a little bit about politics this morning because I found something that written by the Rotary it's very interesting. Our public airways have been brimming with conflict, with competing points of view, shared and passionate, well-reasoned arguments. We wonder how to reach consensus about our latest political challenge. We consider how we got here, how to deal with emotions, and how to reach our own personal conclusions about where we personally stand in the issues being debated. As Rotarians, we attempt to rise above such discourse, to take the high road and not to engage. But it affects us and our families nonetheless. Reinhold Niebuhr, words have guided many through times of discord and difficulty. God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Acceptance of decisions of others which we may not agree, of circumstances we may not face, and choices we would rather not make is often the only way to move forward and avoid conflict. Rotarians need to have courage and wisdom to accept the unchangeable and pivot to take action to change what needs to be changed and to improve lives of those less fortunate so they can live in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. All right, Charlie, are you ready to introduce our speaker?
I'd be happy to. Can you hear me all right?
Can hear you.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce a young man who I first met the day that he was born over in Berlin, Vermont. And I had the pleasure as I watched him grow up. He called me and asked me if I could take him to a Mad River Valley Rotary Club meeting where he was getting a scholarship, and then drive him down to Massachusetts with his pack so that he could walk the length of the state coming north. He's gone on to Hamilton College and graduated and gotten himself the dream job. He's a bike patroller in the summer and a ski patroller in the winter, and does climbing as part of the northwestern New Hampshire mountain rescue team. But I asked him today if he would come and talk to us about experiences on the Long Trail. So Brendan McGill, my grandson.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. We can pull up the first picture. Hi, everyone. My name is Brendan. As my grandfather just introduced, I grew up in Moortown, Vermont. I'm here with my dad, who I learned to hike from. So thank him for everything that I'm talking about today and for accompanying me on my first Long Trail hike. I hiked the Long Trail twice as a through hike. Once in 2016, the summer after my freshman year of high school with my dad. And I hiked the Long Trail again in the summer of 2019, just after graduating high school. And that one was by myself. I'm going to start with just a quick run through of my Long Trail hikes. And I thought, what's going to be interesting to talk about with these hikes? Because I assume most of you have gone for day hikes in Vermont, probably gone for overnight hikes. Many of you will have stayed in shelters on the Long Trail, hiked parts of the Long Trail, or even the whole thing. So what new perspective can I bring? And the point I want to get to is what makes hiking the Long Trail and hiking for that period of time different from just going on a day hike or going on a short overnight hike. What about the experience is unique? What challenges do you face when you're on the trail for that long? And how can we face those challenges? What did we learn? How did we get through it? I'm going to start just with a quick overview of the hikes that I did. I have a few pictures to start. I'm going to go to the next one. This is just a map of the Long Trail. So for those of you who don't know, it's a trail that follows the spine of the Green Mountains all the way through the state of Vermont. It goes from the Massachusetts border near North Adams up to the Canada border, just north of Jay Peak. And when we say a through hike, we're saying we start at one end and then just hike right through all the way to the other end. The first hike that I did with my dad took 28 days over 270 or 280 miles. So about 10 miles a day. And I'll have some pictures of that first hike. Here we are with our packs on, getting ready to go. I'm 14 years old in this picture. So my dad has said several times he was very proud to have his 14-year-old son want to go spend a month in the woods with him. Honestly, it was a pretty easy decision. I've always gotten along with him really well, and it was really great to have him along as someone to hike with. Here we are at the sign at the north end of the trail. We hiked the trail from north to south. A lot of people hike it the other way around because the southern section tends to be a little bit flatter and easier. But we decided we wanted to be a bit contrarian. Rather than hiking it the normal way, we were going to go north to south just to do something a little bit different. We quickly found that it was true, the northern section was harder. Our next picture is at the top of Jay Peak, the first big mountain we had. And one thing you'll notice about this picture is we are in a cloud. And one of the themes of hiking the Long Trail and these hikes in general is that you're spending a lot of time not in a spectacular view. And even when you get to the top of a mountain like Jay Peak, it's generally cloudy. Here we are on Laraway Lookout. This is just north of the Lamoille River up near Johnson. Finally sunny. This is me at Sterling Pond, enjoying the nice mountain scenery up there. One of the last sunny pictures we had for a few days. Here we are crossing the Winooski River Bridge. We have a running joke in our family about crossing these bridges and acting like we're pretty scared to be crossing them. So this is a funny picture that we got here at the Winooski River crossing. This is at the top of Camel's Hump. We have a couple celebratory sodas, and this is also where the first picture in this slide, that beautiful picture of the Green Mountains, came from going down Camel's Hump. Here we are at the top of Killington. I'll have a picture in here later, but Killington is one of the mountains that has its chairlift operational during the summer. So that was a fun experience to go up there and have a restaurant open and be able to stop in and get some food. Then this is us at the Stratton Fire Tower. You can see my dad's beard has gotten a bit longer over the course of the 3 weeks. And we did it. That's the sign at the southern terminus. It looks very similar to the northern sign. There are the endpoints marking the Massachusetts border and the Canada border. So that was 28 days. We were taking it pretty easy. We started beginning of July and ended at the end of July. And then I decided, after I graduated high school, to go ahead and do it again. I had so much fun the first time, I wanted to do it a second time. I have very few pictures from the second hike I was hiking by myself. I didn't really have anyone to take pictures of. So these next two pictures are the only two pictures I could find of that hike. So I was 17 years old, by myself, going into the woods. It took me just under 3 weeks to complete, and it was one of the best experiences of my life, and it really helped me learn a lot about how to take care of myself, how to be an independent person, and just how to face those challenges that you get to when you're alone in the woods. This is the second picture I have, pretty thematic of the hike. A completely empty shelter except for my pack. Nobody else around, just me alone in the woods here. And then I want to briefly mention I hiked the Long Trail a third time in the summer of 2020 as a side-to-side hike. This is a slightly different kind of hike. The through hike is the famous way to do it. Side-to-side means hiking every side trail that connects to the Long Trail. Some people call this redlining, or there are a few different names, but it's hiking every trail in the trail system. So this was the summer of 2020 when we weren't allowed to go anywhere. The shelters were closed to overnight visits. I was here in Vermont for the summer and couldn't really get a job. Everything was shut down. So I thought, oh, what'll I do? A bunch of day hikes. That sounds like a good thing to do when I can't do much else. So I hiked the side trails all in one summer. That ended up being a pretty significant undertaking. It was, I believe, 38 separate days of hiking over the course of the summer. It totaled to about 300 miles of hiking. That includes going up and back down the trails usually. So you're doubling back in yourself, sometimes doing a loop. But that was a different type of experience that I'm not going to talk very much about today. But it was a good way to just see more of the trails, get on some of the lesser used trails, and get all over the state hiking when I couldn't do much else that summer. So the first challenge I want to talk about hiking the Long Trail is being wet. And it's a bit of a joke, but I'm talking about these challenges in order by difficulty. And I would say the most challenging part about hiking the Long Trail is that you're outside all the time. And summer in Vermont is wet. It's raining. It's kind of miserable. It's cold overnight. And you're just generally out in the elements. There's no go back to your car after the end of the day. There's no go take a shower after a couple days. You're wet, you're cold, and you just have to deal with it. So this picture is from our resupply at Smuggler's Notch. We met up with my uncle Mark, who's on the side of that picture, and my mom, who was doing our resupplies. You can see we have all of our rain stuff on. We're ready to go over Mount Mansfield in the pouring rain, and we're just going to try to deal with it. Not able to read this very well, but this is an excerpt from my journal. We both kept journals on the Long Trail every day, talked about our experiences, and that's part of the submission process at the end for certifying that you hiked the Long Trail. Is you submit your journal, you tell them what you did, and it was a really great resource for me over the past couple of weeks, looking back at this hike and just remembering what it was like. So my journal from hiking over Mount Mansfield, I talk about getting up in the morning, it's pouring rain, we don't really want to start, and we were staying at the shelter at Sterling Pond, people from Quebec. I remember getting up in the morning and we were talking about going, oh, we gotta go, we have to meet these people, we have friends coming. And these folks we were staying with said, oh, are you sure it's safe to go out in these conditions? It was thundering and rainy. It probably wasn't all that safe to go out, but we started anyway and ended up having a day of it. And then going over Mount Mansfield, we were in a cloud, it was pouring rain. My uncle Mark, it rains. We went on a canoe trip with him last summer to Waters in Minnesota. it rained every day. It's true, it's not just a joke. But that was especially true on this trip, where we hiked with him over Mansfield. It was raining the entire time, and it was a little bit miserable. And this is us going up the chin on Mansfield. He's got his thumbs up. He's always optimistic, even though he's used to it. You know, every time he goes hiking, I assume it rains, even when we're not there. Here we are at Taylor Lodge. We have all our rain gear on. We're a little wet and miserable, but stopping in for some lunch. And then this is a picture. This actually is from a couple of days later. But what I want to highlight here is the clothesline we have set up at the top of the shelter. So when you're out in the rain, you're getting wet, your socks are wet, your clothes are wet. You don't really have any quick and easy way to deal with that. So what we learned to do is just keep trying to keep stuff dry, getting our socks dry, getting our clothes dry, and just learning to exist in that outdoor environment. So the big difference here is when you're hiking just for a couple days, it's you against being out there. That you go, you're prepared, you have all this rain gear, you try to stay dry, but then if you get wet, you're miserable for a couple of days, you go home, you dry off. When you're out there for a month, you have to learn how to exist in that environment. And it's not as much you against being outside. You learn to be with that environment. You learn to be in the outdoors and just instead of trying to work against that, you work with it. And so things we would do are hang our socks up. I remember putting my socks in my sleeping bag at the end of every day, trying to get them dry overnight. And generally just hoping for sun to come out, honestly. There's not much you can do when it's rainy every day, but you just hope for it to be sunny eventually. This is an excerpt from my dad's journal from that same trip. One of the things he mentions is that even after it stopped raining, the trail is a river, and that makes everything harder. And the trees are wet, they're dripping on you, it stops raining, and it doesn't stop from being wet and miserable. And then at the very end of this journal, he says, I hope the sun comes up tomorrow. I don't know if we can take another day of rain. Our next picture is from the next morning. The sun. This is one of my favorite pictures from the trail, just because it was such a relief to get up in the morning and see the sun shine. This is from Puffer Shelter, which is up on Bolton Mountain. This was one of our favorite shelters to stay at, and it was probably our favorite because we woke up to sunshine. So the moral here was that we had to stay optimistic. We had to just hope that the sun was going to come up, know that it must eventually. We had that song running through our heads, the sun will come up tomorrow? No, probably not, but eventually, yes, the sun will come up eventually. So that brings me to the second big challenge of being out there for so long, and that's the motivation. And how do you stay optimistic and how do you stay motivated when you just have this one singular goal that feels a little daunting? You know, the trail is 272 miles long. It's taking you 3 or 4 weeks to do. How do you get up every day and say, I'm going to go for a hike today, even though you went for a hike yesterday and you went for a hike the day before that and you're going to go for a hike tomorrow? How do you get up and just stay positive about that? And one of the things that really helps is being with other people who you're working together. They were probably just as glad as we were to see the sun that morning. And part of that community is just keeping motivated when one person's down, helping them out, and working together just to stay optimistic on the trail. You can go to the next. This is a picture from our first night. We were up in a shelter up in northern Vermont. My first day on the trail, I didn't totally know what I was getting myself into. And what I remember from that night is that I was just not helpful at all. We got into camp. I was cold. I was miserable. I was exhausted. I just wanted to eat something and go to bed. And you can't do that when you're hiking. You have to make your own food. You can't just throw something in the microwave. There's no easy out to any of this. The only way to get some food is to make some food. The only way to warm up is to put some clothes on. And I'm really grateful for my dad for making food for me that day. But so the helpful part about hiking with someone else there is that when you aren't having a good day, they can help you. When they're not having a good day, you can help them. And when I hiked the long trail by myself, this was the most challenging part, is I didn't have somebody else to be there for me. I didn't have anyone to help me. When you're out there, you're walking all day. There's nothing else to think about. If you're having a bad day, you just start thinking, wow, I'm miserable. My feet hurt. My socks are wet. My pack is heavy. And with no one else to talk to about that, it's easy to get in your own head and sort of spiral into, this isn't going well. I have 14 more days of this. I have to walk 10 more miles today. This is terrible. I want to quit. And everybody sort of expected that as a hiker, my second time through this trail, I would know what I was doing and I would be able to get through it pretty easily. And I would say honestly that every single day of hiking the long trail by myself, there was at least one point in the day where I didn't think I was going to make it. I thought I was going to have to stop. And I'm really grateful to the people that I was meeting along the way. And the first time hiking with my dad, and all the people on the trail just to keep you motivated and keep you happy. Here we are playing some cards. One of the things that we did to keep a little bit distracted when we get into camp, we also had a little travel chess board with us. We played several games of chess. I think we ended up with a pretty even score over the course of the hike. This is one of our resupply points. We were getting food resupplied every week or so, and my mom was coming and giving us food, giving us a little extra food too, maybe some French toast and pizza, just for a nice special snack. It was nice to see her and just see people every few days on the trail. Here we are at the top of Middlebury with some friends. We had these friends come and stay at night with us and then hike with us for a day. Also, the dog Reggie here is a great hiking partner. Then this picture is from one of the shelters in the southern section of the trail. And the people in this picture are some AT through hikers. So the southern 100 miles of the long trail is shared with the Appalachian Trail. So when you're on that section of trail on the right time of year, you'll see lots and lots of people who are going through hiking the Appalachian Trail. They started in Georgia and they've hiked almost 2,000 miles at this point. So their experience is a little bit different from ours. And it was actually interesting to see the way that they had a different perspective on the trail than we did. Most of the through hikers that we talked to were at this point in the trail a little bit bored with hiking and a little bit down on the whole hiking thing. And I get it. They had been hiking for several months at that point. It wasn't exciting to get up and go for a hike for them. One thing that I remember in particular about this shelter is that these were a few through hikers that actually seemed like they were having fun. compared to a lot of thru hikers who weren't necessarily having fun day to day at that point, which is not to say that the whole experience is a bad experience for them, but the actual day to day hiking isn't always the most fun thing to do. So it was really nice when we did come across people who were having a good time and who were able to motivate us and were able to stay motivated themselves for that long of a hike. We always felt a little bit overshadowed by them just because they've been hiking for so long. But the community out there is just whoever shows up to your shelter, you're friends with them. You're helping them out, you're talking with them. And so they always just made us feel welcome, and we made people feel welcome no matter who they were, no matter what kind of hike they were doing. And it was just great to share the shelter with people like that. This is a picture from Devil's Gulch, which is a section of trail up in northern Vermont that's particularly rocky and difficult. So the third challenge I want to talk about is the physical challenge of hiking that far. And it's a bit funny that I'm putting this third, because when you hear that someone's hiking 272 miles, it seems like the most difficult part would be walking 272 miles. And the walking is hard, hiking's tough, you have a heavy pack. I want to stress that these first two things, that just being outdoors all the time and staying motivated, were the most challenging part. And then the physical part is kind of a secondary challenge, that it's just what you happen to be doing every day throughout the day, while you're also facing this incredible challenge of just being out there and surviving in the woods. So this picture is just a little snapshot of the kind of hiking we were doing every day. The Long Trail is a very, very challenging trail, especially compared to a lot of other trails like it. Most trails, like the Appalachian Trail, are pretty well manicured, and a lot of people hike on them, so it ends up being a fairly smooth trail. It doesn't necessarily go over every single mountain that you pass by. Especially the northern section of the Long Trail, where it's not joined up with that, is really rough, it's really rugged, and you go over every single little mountain peak. All these mountains that you haven't heard of that are 1,500 or 2,000 feet tall, but they're just straight up and then straight down the other side, and there's no view at the top, and you just have to walk over all of them. This is a little excerpt from my journal from my second hike. I don't know if you folks can read that up there, but I'm just talking about how much my feet hurt. This is from day 3 and day 5 of my hike. I had done this before, I knew what I was getting myself into, and I was still shocked by how much my feet hurt at the end of the day, and my legs hurt at the end of the day. And this is going back to not thinking I was going to make it. Every day, something hurts, something doesn't go right, and you just have to keep walking through it, and there's not much else to do. So on these 2 days, I didn't know if I was going to make it to the shelter, and looking back, of course I was going to make it. But when you're in the moment and you're walking and your feet hurt, it's easy to just get down on that and think, this is really miserable, I want to stop. And there's not much else you can do but just keep on going. You can go to the next one. As far as solutions to that, there's not much you can do. You do have to walk. You do have to get there. That's what you're doing. If you just sit down and stop walking all day, you're not going to get anywhere. One of the solutions that we came up with to all that fatigue and just giving ourselves a break was making sure to stop early and stop often. This picture is from one of our lunch breaks, eating some ramen, stopping and cooking some food. A lot of folks don't like to stop when they're hiking. They don't like to stop for a long lunch. they have a goal, they're gonna hike a certain amount of miles and they want to get there. When I hiked the line trail with my dad, we took a little bit of a different approach where we were stopping often. We were stopping for a longer lunch. We would usually get to the shelter by 3 o'clock in the afternoon and just stop because we were tired. And yeah, there's not much else to do, but if you hike too far in each day, you're just going to wear yourself out. And you have to stop, you have to give yourself breaks, and you have to take a measured approach. So we really enjoyed a couple of days a week. We would stop and have ramen for lunch, get the stove going, and just have a longer break in the middle of the day. Here we are at the top of Killington. This is one of the times where we got to go inside and go to a restaurant. We got some ice cream and chips. The theme here is stopping and eating food. That's the other key, is you're really walking a long way, you're using a lot of calories, you're using a lot of energy. And one of the keys for us to stay happy and to stay motivated for all of that was eating some really good food. And that's one of the points that we took away as something that we did right and something that we would recommend for people to do on a hike like this, is you have to keep yourself happy. And how you keep yourself happy is having a good meal, having some good food, having good snacks. We met a lot of folks out there who were trying to save weight or trying to save time and maybe making some sacrifices there in the quality of their food, the quantity of their food. And we're big proponents of always having good meals with us. We met one person in particular who looked at what we were eating and said, "Oh, beef jerky or pasta, whatever it was, that's not very calorie dense. That's not very efficient." And we asked him what he was eating, and he said, "Oh, I have couscous. Yeah, couscous. It's calorie dense. It's the right thing to eat." And then the entire time he was just complaining about how sick and tired he was of his food. The one thing he wanted to do was just go and get a home cooked meal. That he was eating couscous for every single dinner. And we had a hard time kind of convincing him, you don't have to eat couscous every day. And that's one of the keys to staying happy, was just having a variety, not eating couscous every day, having some good food with us. We had a lot of pastas with some good sauces. We had a lot of snacks. We had homemade beef jerky that we made. We stopped and got ice cream every chance we could. We got ramen when we had it. And we just overall had a good time with the food. Here I am pulling a can of root beer out of the river. This was part of the trail magic that we experienced along the trail. Trail magic, for those of you who don't know, is when people who are a friend of the trail or just somebody who lives nearby and wants to help out will stop at a trailhead or stop and drop some food off for people who are doing this kind of hike, just to give them a little treat throughout the day. There wasn't a whole lot of trail magic that we came across, but there were a few instances where we found a drink in the woods or somebody stopped and gave us some cookies. And even if it wasn't an official thing, this was a pretty official. It seemed like they were regularly stopping and putting some sodas in the stream here for hikers. But even just people we came across every day would just give us a cookie or give us some food that they had in their pack. And that was always really appreciated, and another way that the community out there was helping each other to get through this. I can't quite read what this one says, but yeah, you can go to the next slide. Here I am hiking down into the notch at Killington. This is the last photo I have here, and I really enjoyed this photo because it's just a person in the woods. And as simple as that sounds, that's really what it comes down to when you're hiking the long trail and when you're out there for that long is the real challenge is that you are out there by yourself or with one other person, and you have all these challenges that you have to face. And you also have an incredible amount of agency to face them. So the challenge of the trail is that you have all these difficulties, you're wet all the time, you have to walk over all these mountains. But the real joy of it and the real beauty of it is that you have the ability to face those challenges. That if you're hungry, you make some food. If you're tired, you sit down and rest. There's a lot of challenges that we face outside of hiking the trail that it feels like there's not much we can do about. But when you're out there and you have these simple challenges of, my feet hurt, I'm gonna sit down. My pack hurts, I'm gonna take it off for a minute. That as a 14-year-old and as a 17-year-old, it was a really great experience to be out there and just feel like I had some way to take care of myself, give me responsibility for myself, and give myself this really extravagant challenge that I was able to face and tackle step by step throughout each day, throughout each week, and end up being successful both times and just having a really great experience that I learned a lot from. I want to leave plenty of time to answer questions. I know I didn't go into a lot of specifics of our everyday routines or what we had with us, which is something that a lot of people are curious about. So I'm going to open it up to questions and give some thorough answers.
Thank you very much. This was very interesting. How much did your pack weigh?
That's a good question. The first hike that I did with my dad, I believe my pack was about 25 pounds when it was fully loaded with food. We had resupplies every week, and that was about 8 pounds of food. So it varied quite a bit from the beginning of that resupply cycle to the end. And it was a very noticeable difference when we were running low on food. It actually was pretty nice to have a light pack. The second time that I hiked it, it was pretty similar weight, even though I was by myself. When you're by yourself, it's easy for the pack to be a little bit heavier because you have to carry everything yourself. You can't share some of the appliances and that sort of thing. But I had a pretty good system. I was traveling pretty light. I remember at one point when I was very low on food, weighing it at about 14 pounds, which felt really good on your back, much better than a 30-pound pack that a lot of people have on.
Thank you.
There's a question again.
Do you have a trail name?
Ooh, good question. When I hiked with my dad, we had the trail names Scott and Edmonton. For those historians out there, we were hiking north to south. Scott and Edmonton were polar explorers who were going to the South Pole in the early 20th century. We both did make it alive, unlike Scott, who made it to the South Pole but didn't make it back. It was a bit of a joke between us that those two were racing to the South Pole. We were definitely not racing, we were working together. But that's how we signed all of our journals and how we signed into the logbooks. When I hiked by myself, my trail name was Wren, W-R-E-N. That was just a nickname for myself. Didn't come from anything particular.
Mine was Hamburg Heel. Hamburg Heel, because
Where did that come from?
my heels were always, moleskin was my friend.
All right, one more question.
No, go ahead.
What percentage of your hike was camping in a tent?
The first time we didn't bring a tent. We stayed in a shelter every night. And when you're getting into the shelter a little bit early, like we usually were, that always worked out well. There was always space in the shelter. That's one of the concerns if you don't have a tent, is if you show up to a shelter and there's no space, you wouldn't have a place to stay.
What's the typical mileage from one shelter to the next?
They're maybe about 7 or 8 miles apart on average. So we were going 1 or 2 shelters throughout the day. They're not evenly spaced, so it depended on the day. The second time I did have a tent with me because I was planning to go a little bit longer days and didn't want to get into a situation where a shelter was full. But I only ended up using it a couple days. People, especially on the Appalachian Trail, who are going for an even longer period of time, really enjoy having a tent because it's a little bit of a private space. That when you're staying in a shelter, you're just staying out in the open, you're staying with whoever's there. There's not a lot of privacy there. So having a tent in that situation becomes your space. That's where you can go and it's just you, nobody else goes in there, and it's just a little bit of privacy in the world where you don't really have much alone time otherwise.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So Brenda,
Today, we're going to make a donation to the Williston Central School mentoring program, and they give you a little card. And we have one more thing for you to do. Very important to pick the winning raffle ticket and then read the last 3 numbers.
Thank you. I think we might have just had a question on Zoom as well.
We are out of time though.
Okay. Thank you.
So maybe they can connect with you after and ask questions.
All right, everyone get your tickets ready. Drumroll. Winning ticket number 9750408. That ends in 0408.
Sherry wins.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I can relate with the being wet and being wet and being wet. Okay, Charlie, while we have you up here, I wanted an update about daffodil planting.
well, I was
That's
hoping,
something
that we could plant the daffodils at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. I have a couple
Okay.
offers. The plan is to gather in the parking lot and bring battery powered electric drills and augers and trowels, and Andy is getting a big bag of dirt so we can drill a hole, put a bulb in, and then take the dirt that Andy buys to fill the hole. It's dependent on Armand being able to brush hog that field before we get there. I've sent him a couple of emails, but I haven't gotten a response yet. So if you happen to see Armand, you can ask him if he's able to do that.
Armand, are you able to do that? He's doing it today. And where's the meeting spot?
Well, we'll meet in the parking lot across the street from the church and go up the walking path. It's a big field on the right-hand side of the walking path as we're going. Same place that we planted 2 years ago. So I think that last time we planted bulbs about 1 meter apart. This time, if we put them about a half a meter apart, we can fill in some of the spaces. It should be fun and a good day.
Okay, yeah, Saturday looks beautiful. So Saturday morning at 9, cross the road from here, come plant daffodils and bring good tools if you have them. All right. Howard, are you ready to be inspiring? Oh, you didn't forget, did you?
Good morning. This is my attempt at providing some moment of inspiration this morning. So I apologize in advance. I'm gonna go through with some reading and I hope that does the job for me.
Can you hold the microphone? Thank you.
So I am inspired by people who have a sense of fair play. I like fairness in life. It comforts me. And how did I write this? It comforts me as a member of I think we all want it to be fair society. Sometimes I wonder if we really do all want it to be fair. But one of the things that got me thinking this way, I was reading the paper, there was an article about a Fulton County, Georgia Superior Court Judge, Robert McBurney, who ruled that Georgia officials have a duty to certify the election and can't go back on that duty. There have been some people who have tried to certifiers who have not wanted to certify. And his point was that if an election official uncovers what appears to be fraud, they still have to do something about it, but they still have to certify that the votes were counted and here's what the votes said. And then they can bring the potential fraud or whatever concern it is that they have to the appropriate authority. So the idea was that the judge was trying to keep just another spot where a judge was trying to keep elections fair and in line. And I took some heart in that time. So that was one moment of fairness that I keyed in on while I was reading the paper. There was another one that I keyed in on. The World Health Organization is working like mad to create humanitarian pauses in Gaza. And, they're using that time to vaccinate children and try for some aid. In particular, a lot of those vaccinations are something near and dear to Rotarians. They're vaccinating for polio, and they're hoping to vaccinate on the order of 600,000 people, which I thought was really exceptional. And the idea of fairness there is just the idea of trying to give kids a better chance in the midst of a horrible situation. And that's my inspiring moment.
Thank you. All right. Sally is going to collect some money from us today since Chris is out and about.